Okay, go ahead on. I'm filming. Thank you. I love you. Hey there, writers, and welcome back to another Reddit Reacts. So, I did look it up this time. That's the name we're going for. I think I said last Friday that I was going to do an Am I the Asshole this Friday, but that didn't work out. So, we are once again doing writing advice, as you can probably already tell from the title. So, we are delving back into r/writing, and I went ahead and did something a little new this week that I haven't done the previous weeks. I sort of just scrolled throughout the week and found interesting posts the last time, 2 times. This week I went, and when you first go into the subs, you can order them by hot, new, or top. So I went ahead and I clicked top for this week. So there are a couple that I just stumbled upon, but the majority are some of the top posts that people have been asking about. The first one we have is, ever read someone else's book and become a little depressed because it was so good? So OP is saying, as an author, reading a book that has done well but you don't think is hugely better than your own is actually quite encouraging. We'll get to that. Gives you hope. But then you read books that use language in a way you could never hope to emulate, and although you enjoy the book, it's quite depressing. So they compare it to a Sunday League footballer. For those Americans, I'm pretty sure you mean soccer player. Looking at Messi or Ronaldo, marveling at how much better than you they are, etc., etc. So now, since becoming an author, I read books from a slightly different perspective. I'm secretly pleased when I read one that isn't very good. Is that bad? So, one, I won't say it's bad to be pleased that you think other people's work is less good than yours. I don't fault you for finding hope in stories that you believe are less well-written, we'll say, that are less well-written than yours are. Because, it's a human emotion to be like, oh, well, they have low reviews on theirs, or people are saying this isn't well-written, but they found an agent, they found a publisher, they found a publishing house, and they got their book out there. So there's hope for me. Like, that's a pretty normal emotion, and I think a lot of writers can actually relate really hard to that. You should probably not feel good about it, if I had to guess. I mean, I will argue that probably is another pretty human emotion to feel, but you might want to check yourself if you're feeling good that bad books are getting published, or that you think they're bad and they're getting published. But about the actual question about becoming depressed when you read a book that's better than yours, I personally don't. And I'll tell you why. I do feel like, oh my God, I can never be as good as, so-and-so an author. Sherilyn Kenyon is a big one for me. I love reading her stuff, and her work has actually influenced a lot of my writing in my character voice, in how my side characters come into play, in the fact that I do have a very involved A-list cast, I'll say, and B-list cast. I would highly recommend reading her. But when I read her books, I do have that sense of, wow, I'm never going to be able to compete on this level because my style was so influenced by her and is so reminiscent of her style, it is sort of a direct comparison in my mind. And I'm not Sherilyn Kenyon. Let's just be real about that. I'm never going to be. So I do get the disappointment that you'll never, be as good as your idols. But on that note, you don't technically know that yet. You don't have a book out there. You might, but you haven't hit it big if you're asking these questions. You don't have your work out there to the mass public, or you haven't, hit on the goal that, say J.K. Rowling did, or Sherilyn Kenyon did, or, anybody who has become big. And I think you can look at that as a hopeful kind of thing. At the point where you are when you're looking at authors and kind of getting sad that you're not them, you have all this room to improve, where once you get to that level, you don't have any room to lose. So it's like down here, you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Once you hit that top, you have a lot more to lose. If you put out a book that is not very good, you have a much wider fan base reading you. You have a much more critical fan base reading you. And a lot of people get very attached to your characters, or as the author's characters. And it however consciously or subconsciously affects how they read your books in the future. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, becoming that great. And where we are now, we can only get greater. And I think that's kind of a hopeful way to look at it. So we'll go on to the next one. Does it get easier to write for longer? And OP is basically saying they're working on a short story, trying to make it a priority, and have decided that they'd like to write for an hour every morning. They tried doing it this first day. First 20 minutes was great. After that, they got a headache, and everything they were writing just came out really, not good. So they're asking, does it get easier after you've done it for a while to write for longer, or is it a matter of pushing through and just putting something on a page? Interestingly enough, I actually did kind of experience this. There's another video. I did a week writing like Charles Dickens, and I had a week. I was on Charles Dickens's schedule, and I wanted to produce a short story at the end of it. So one short story in a week. So did it, nailed it. I won't say it got easier necessarily. Like, there was definitely times where I just stared at a blank page for a good amount of time. So I forget exactly how long Charles wrote for. I'm pretty sure he wrote for almost a full 8 hours during the day. You'll have to go see the video to check for sure. Hi, kiddo. We were joined by a guest. So, but while I was writing, even though I had the story idea in mind, I had a general outline after the first day, and I was writing, there was definitely times where I was just kind of like spacing out and just staring at a page. It gets easier to get into the routine of writing, but there is always going to be moments where you're just like, I don't know what's happening right now. Like, all I want to do right now is go take a nap or go talk to this person or go call my friend or what have you. And it's just a matter of pushing through. Not everything you write during these times are going to be gold. It is a little bit about just getting something on a page, because you can't edit a blank page. We've all heard it. And we hate that it's true, but it's true. So our next one, we have a little bit of an intense one, and it's kind of a 2-for-1. So on Reddit, I found any tips for writing characters of different ethnicities. And then to play into that, I saw on Twitter earlier, I know, I'm cheating. I saw on Twitter earlier, an author asked, do you mention your character's skin color? So I thought both of those were really interesting. So let's start with the Reddit one. So they say, it's kind of long, so I'm just going to try to hit some bullet points. I'm always making characters that differentiate each other in all sorts of aspects. Personalities, body types, style, ethnicity. Same, friend. The problem appears the moment I try to expand a character, putting them through different scenarios and thinking about their childhood, their family, and the way they treat or are treated by certain people. Here's where I seem to struggle, because I don't want to make any fake assumptions, especially with sensitive topics. So then they go on to give an example. So, but it does say, what I seem to struggle the most with is the sense of privilege, or most of the lack of, that a lot of these characters face. I too have run into this, and I've touched on it in other videos, and I'll continue to touch on it because I think it's a really important topic for writers to discuss, and specifically white writers to discuss. And I have felt really similarly to how OP has felt. I too put an effort into making my cast as diverse as possible. And that does end up with me writing characters whose lives I can't understand. Maybe not understand, but whose lives I haven't lived and whose lives I can't presume to have experience in. So what I have done myself, what seems to have worked for me, and what I would suggest to OP, is a crap ton of research. And it's not really a one-size-fits-all. I particularly like, and I've said them before, a Tumblr called Writing with Color. I think they are incredibly helpful for writers of all races, ethnicities, and creeds to learn about other races, ethnicities, and creeds. I think the important thing to know is that you are still going to mess up. I think that to expect yourself to write somebody who is not you, who has not lived a life that you have any experience in, and expecting yourself to be 100% perfect is unrealistic. It's unrealistic and frankly a little unattainable in my opinion. So why bother, you might ask? So there is a new thing, and I have a blog post about it that I'll go ahead and link down below, and they are called sensitivity readers. Essentially what they are people of different races, ethnicities, religions, creeds, sexualities, anything you can think of. And you basically pay them to be your beta reader. Typically, beta readers are just reading your story to make sure that it's entertaining, that it flows properly, that they can understand it, that sort of thing, that you have a good story going on. With these readers, these sensitivity readers, they read it specifically from the viewpoint of their background. So I plan, once I'm done with my manuscript for Kepler, to hire sensitivity readers because I'm dealing with a lot of backgrounds that I don't have experience in. I have 2 Mexican-American characters. I have a half American, half Turkish Muslim character. And I have one's bisexual, but 1 gay male character. So while I understand the bi side of it, I don't understand what it's like to be gay and male. So yes, I'm going to probably sink a lot of money in because I'm very intent on making sure everybody comes across as they're supposed to, or as they would realistically. And while it is an investment in yourself, I think it's an investment worth taking if you are going to try to write creeds that are not yours. And I think it's a good investment that you should make. So that ties in, like I said, to the Twitter post that I found that said, do you mention characters' skin colors? And it was kind of just a general question for people to answer. And I was a little intrigued, we'll go with, at the variety of answers that were there. And I don't know if it's because I've turned into a social justice warrior type person after doing so much research, or if I'm just like high on my own farts a la South Park.
We're a little more progressive and ahead of the curve here in San Francisco.
I was surprised at how many people said no. And the reason that I'm surprised by this, and I will say it was a lot of white authors saying no. I don't want to generalize because there's just, I don't even know how many replies. Just a whole slew of replies is what we're going with. There are a lot of white writers that are just kind of like, nah, bro, I don't mention skin color. It's not important, which we won't get into that. This isn't a social justice channel yet. So one thing I would like to impart very much so to other writers that are watching this video, specifically white writers that are watching this video, is it is important and it does matter. And there is such a thing as the white default. And it's one of those systematic things that is very hard to pinpoint, but it does happen. When a character is not described, it is automatically assumed they're white because in the media, most characters are white. So it is important to describe skin tone. That same Tumblr blog that I mentioned, Writing with Color, does say there is a way to not go overboard. You can just mention it in passing, but it is important to mention. It's just one of those things that you do need to mention. You don't need to go overboard. You don't need to bash people over the head with the fact that you have a non-white character, but you do need to mention it. And one way that it kind of normalizes this sort of mentioning is to also describe your white characters. One of my characters, Aiden, is white. And I do make it a point that if I am kind of describing a group of people, I describe Aiden being white or Aiden's pale skin or what have you in the same breath that I describe the rest of the group in order to differentiate everybody from each other. I don't just kind of leave him as like the default to assume he's white. I include him with the rest of the descriptions, just as normal, basically. So I do think that's an important subject that writers need to address, and that it is a little bit of an awkward subject because, again, the white default thing is such a subtle implication, and it's such a subtle systematic thing that it is really hard to pinpoint, to the point where I'm sure a lot of people don't actually believe that it exists, but it does. I mean, there's plenty of examples, and there are plenty of people who have probably had personal experience with this when a character is not described and you automatically assume they're white, and then you get a description later in the book that they're not white, and you're kind of like, oh, okay, that's fine, I guess, whatever. So it is a conversation that needs to be had, so just have it openly and respectfully. All right, so the last two are pretty short ones. Second to last, how do you plot a good character arc? And simple solution to that I found helps me, it may not help everybody, as with all advice, but one thing that helps me is I almost outline the arc itself. Like, you outline stories, you outline, plot development, you outline how the scenes are going to work. You can outline a character arc. You can outline, this is where this character starts, this is where this character ends, and then plot little milestones, I guess we'll say. And you plot the milestones as you go, and then you just try to fit those milestones into your writing so that you have kind of a gradual arc going on, and you can see, in straight bullet point form how this is going to happen, and then you just kind of like subtly meld it into your writing to make it, flow and great and awesome. That's my advice for that. And then last one, I yap too much at the start of every chapter, need advice. So it's essentially exactly what the title says. They ramble. I ramble. I'm a huge rambler. I won't say I'm necessarily purple prose because I don't think I'm that fancy, but I ramble just about everything. My advice, again, that works for me, may not work for everybody, but my advice, edit. Write out your ramble, let yourself ramble, let's just put it all on the page, put it all out there. And then when you read through it, if you're anything like me, sometimes when I'm reading, I'll realize that I'm spacing out on my own writing, which is not a good thing. And I'll realize that I'm going through, a bunch of paragraphs of descriptiveness, and my own brain is kind of like, girl, can you get back to the point, please? Like, can we go back to the story at some point? And that's how I know at least 90% of this paragraph just has to go. If I've lost my interest and I'm writing it, I've definitely lost the reader's interest. So I would say put it all on the page and edit it down as you're editing. That's your best bet. And I hate editing, so just know that it's necessary, even if you hate it. So those are our Reddit questions for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed them. I would love to hear some of your guys' thoughts. We actually had a few. We had, how do you keep from rambling, or how do you fix your rambling in retrospect? Do you plot good character arcs, and how so? How do you do it? How do you describe other ethnicities? Do you guys describe skin color? Everything that we've talked about today, I would love to hear your guys' comments, specifically about describing skin color and describing your character's ethnicities. I can't say how much I think that is an important subject that writers need to be talking about. So please feel free to start respectful discussions down in the comments, and I will try to get to everybody as they're commenting. So thank you for joining me this week. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you guys next time. Later, writers.